Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Pleasure to have you for this new webinar regarding Solar Plaza Summit Nordics. Today we'll be talking about the investment outlook for utility scale PV and storage projects in the Nordics. And I'll just have a quick intro, and then I'll leave, of course, the presentation to Mark Augustenborg Odum, who's the CFO of Better Energy, who will also be tuning in right now. Pleasure to have you. I'll go very quickly with the intro. We're doing this webinar as an intro to our flagship Nordics conference, which this year will be hosted on October the 3rd in Copenhagen. Quite a lot of interesting topics because one full track dedicated to storage, one to PPAs, a lot also on project financing. We'll have Nordic Investment Bank, SEB, DNB, Opton, also Better Energy, EQT also, probably know lately made quite a nice offer for OX2. So there's going to be quite some interesting attendees and lots of topics to cover. So make sure also to sign up. But not just the Nordics conference, also we're having our second edition this year with a one-day full track in Finland on November 28th. Also super interesting market, lots of pipelines of storage and PV projects going on. So we also make sure to reserve your spot for our Finnish summit. And of course, I can't go without just a quick intro for those of you who are tuning in for the first time. Solar Plaza, you know us for our summits, our events, our conferences, but also our content in form of white papers, articles, and webinars around the topic of solar. And this year we're celebrating our 20th anniversary, so quite an achievement. Practical notes. So today we'll have a presentation by Mark. Please make sure to send in your questions, but we'll have a Q&A in the end, so make sure to send in your questions. Also, if there are technical issues, my colleague Tom and I are here to support. And yes, this question comes up a lot of times. We will share the presentation slides and the recordings. Just give us 1 or 2 days, so by Monday latest they will be in your inbox. But let's make it interactive. I'm looking forward to receiving your questions. I'll quickly introduce Mark, who's the CFO and co-founder of Better Energy, Danish-based IPP. You might know them as a pan-European IPP with operations scattered all across Europe. Of course, with background in energy finance, given the fact that Mark has also covered several years in advisory business, most notably in KPMG, London-based, and what an experience it is. So we're glad to have here Mark's insights today. And that said, I think at this point I will leave the stage directly to Mark, who will give an overview about what's going on in the market and what is the investment outlook and trend. So Mark, pleasure to have you again, and the stage is all yours, and I will tune in back again for the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Nicola, and a pleasure to be invited to this event and to this very interesting topic, investments in large-scale solar PV and BESS in the Nordics. It is a really interesting topic, and we in Better Energy has certainly started investing in the area, and I'll come into some of the dynamics that we see in the area. But I should also be the first to say we actually haven't completed any transaction with external parties, neither on a partnership equity or debt. It is gaining a lot of interest, and there is a lot of new to take on board when looking at it. But it's definitely an interesting area, and I just need to figure out how I move my slides here. Oh, it's just a bit slow. Here we go. And first of all, trying to find out why BESS and solar PV is so important. If you take storage sort of isolated, it does de-risk the solar PV project because it provides flexibility on the production side. Thereby, it also increases the value because it's better and easier to match the demand profile when you have a storage project on board. It also gives some resilience in form of backup power or other things to the grid. And I think it's sort of simplified, presented in the illustration that you see below on the left, where we have a demand curve and a solar supply curve. And if you have a battery, sort of simply speaking, you can peak shift and move some of the production from the peak time to a slightly different profile that matches the demand curve better. When you look at it together with a PV plant or another generating assets, it also comes with some benefits. So combined, it comes with the benefits of having a combined risk profile, and it's so that the solar PV plant mitigates the battery and vice versa. And seen co-located, it really enhances the bankability and investability from an infrastructure perspective, because it becomes a more stable asset in a world where we don't have any subsidies. And I'm come back to sort of the subsidies, because that is good from an investment banking perspective, but not particularly good from the energy grid supply and demand side as a whole. When you co-locate a battery with a PV plant, you also get the benefits of a better grid utilization. You basically use the same grid for more, and therefore have sort of a more efficient grid use, and thereby also a lower capex for your total project or the projects combined. And you get a better utilization when you are shifting the power, as we discussed before with the peak shifting. When talking about the de-risking, there is a lot of revenue upside in a battery, and it generates balance to the grid. But besides sort of the peak shifting and matching the profile, there's also a number of ancillary services. Depending on the market, there are different service types, and for each energy area market, there are different prices and different services one can provide with the flexibility to provide balancing. The key thing with that is that you can consider that purely merchant if you just see it from the battery side, and it's very difficult to get some transparency on what earnings you will get, even midterm, long term, maybe even short term. Currently, the prices look very attractive in many markets, but what we can see in markets that are more mature, especially UK and the US, is that there's also been significant cannibalization in the ancillary services market. The other thing that BESS generates there is a lower balancing cost. So when the demand and supply side is more balanced, it also reduces the cost as a whole to balance the grid. And while we've seen capture prices on solar becoming lower and lower, we've seen the flexibility prices go higher and higher, and eventually they hopefully will balance themselves out. One way of taking that revenue that is very short term, very merchant, it can be a very risky revenue stream seen from an investment perspective or bankability perspective. And what we see is that the assets is introduced with a so-called tolling agreement, where there is an operator that handles the market risk, and then there is an asset that gets a more fixed and thereby more bankable and investable long-term income stream. And the other thing is the arbitrage and capture optimization. That is also very interesting aspect, especially when we're looking at the so-called duck curve, where we have some relatively late peaks in revenue, where the sun normally doesn't shine, but if you can move some of the generation to later states in the day, you optimize the revenue streams from that, but you also reduce the risk you might have on PPAs with the project, might have a baseload PPA, and thereby you reduce that risk. So all in all, it's a very interesting aspect with a battery co-located. So you can say that there is some added complexity, there's some technology risk, how's the battery going to work in the future, what it's going to cost to operate, what's warranties and all the traditional risks, but also what it's going to cost in the future to implement. But combined with solar, it creates a more stable profile, especially in a purely market-driven space, maybe less so on subsidized assets, but I'll come back to that. Talking about this need for flexibility, power markets is like sometimes it's like a bathtub. It's all balanced, and the price is set on market terms based on the merit order, and that's basically the same price where different kinds of assets bid in with the prices, and then that sets the price. There are some other slightly more complex mechanisms, but sort of simply put, you can see the different types of assets and what the cost is to produce. And the special thing with solar and wind is that it actually doesn't cost anything to produce other than the capex you have spent, but seen from just an operation, it's a very low price, and therefore we also move the prices lower when we introduce renewable energy in the grid, which is of course good for society. We also see prices getting below zero, and that's when the demand goes into the area where renewable energy can fulfill the demand side. And the question is, why does it go zero? There are many reasons for it, but some of the reasons are that subsidized assets based on feed-in tariffs and CFDs and other don't incentivize the operators to shut down or to limit production when there's no need for it, because they get paid anyway. So one can say that the subsidized that has facilitated the rise of renewable energy is now also the Achilles heel in the market, which is an interesting dynamic. There is also the fact that many assets have not been built to be flexible. So in order to add the kind of flexibility that is required to switch off your wind farm or your solar park is technology that you sometimes need to install with new scanner systems, new controllers, and other things on site. And you also need to make sure that this is coordinated with the grid operators. Looking at capture risk and the so-called duck curve, this is a picture of the Danish market. I'm actually uncertain about whether it's DK1 or DK2, but just for the example, what one can see is the production profile for a solar. Sun goes up, sun goes down, very easy. You can see something similar over the year from January to December, where 80% of the production takes place in Q2 and in Q3. And with more and more solar energy being introduced to the market, we also see that there is a downwards pressure on the power prices at the time when the sun shines. And one can see that from 18 up to 23, and the curves you see they've gone slowly lower. And I think that is a trend one will see unless that is sort of balanced out with the BESS or other types of assets, or if we see an introduction of flexibility on the demand side or an increased demand in the hours. But at the moment, there's a lot of very cheap energy available, and if we look back in history, the last 2 times we saw a lot of cheap energy available, it turned into an industrial revolution, first with coal, and later with oil and gas. So it's going to be really interesting to see what's going to happen when the electrifications of the grid with renewable energy lead to much lower power prices and thereby facilitates higher demand. If we are looking at just a day in May 24, so just using sort of an example with a 2-hour BESS system model for one cycle. So what one can see is like when the prices is at its lowest, the energy is charging and taking away the production and to the grid, and moving it over to a battery point, and then you discharge the battery at a later stage, and then you get a different profile than what we saw before, moving from the yellow dotted line to the blue line. And in this example here, the capture rate is improved with about 8%, which is significant on a solar PV project. And that excludes potential revenues from ancillary services and other things. So just giving a bit of background here, I think it's a very interesting to look at the battery and solar PV as investment objects. I think for a long time assets have been seen very isolated, and I think the assets is more moving either to a portfolio basis or a project basis with more matching the demand curves, and we also see more flexibility in the demand curves. So the interesting aspect is that on one hand we see a more complex type of assets in form of a battery with a more complex revenue stream coming in. On the other hand, it actually it's a hedge together with the solar PV plants that enhances the revenue security and reduces the risk of capture, but also the risk of curtailment, and therefore it makes the assets more bankable. For many years, I've been old in the solar industry, but for many years I was always told that solar would never be a real asset because we had oil and gas, and that was cheap and reliable, and there was no way that solar could compete with this. But what we see now is that we have lower cost of energy, lower leverage cost of energy than many other energy sources. And with the storage and potential flexibility on the demand side, we also start to get more reliable, making this asset class much more competitive and currently the most competitive asset. You could extend sort of the combination to add solar, wind, and storage, or maybe with hydro when you take it from a Nordic perspective. You take the full combination of solar, wind, hydro, and storage, and a very integrated Nordic power grid. I think the Nordics is in the fortunate position that one can be an large-scale energy exporter of relatively low cost energy, either in the form of electricity or in the form of hydrogen or others. And I'm quite certain that that will facilitate many new industries, which we already seen in form of investments in data centers to facilitate AI and other digital services. We see it in PTX. We see it in heat pumps. We see it in many things. It's really interesting what this new era of cheap and reliable renewable energy will bring. And I think there's an enormous opportunity for investments and project and portfolio finance for investors in various forms. It could be in long-term infrastructure investments, but it could also be in short-term investments in form of benefiting for the very high levels of revenue from ancillary services that we see in the market, where we have a payback time of, if you use current cost of a battery compared to the revenue on just a few years. And that was the introduction I had to solar and BESS from an investment perspective, and I'm very open for questions.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mark. Short and concise. I'll pull up the Q&A and I remind also the audience to send in a question. Mark, let's start first with questions related to, of course, project financing, because we see that, let's say, banks declare quite an intention and willingness to finance storage assets, but there is indeed a problem in terms of, let's say, revenue certainty, right? As you mentioned before, we could probably split it into two, right? As let's say, grid support and also via arbitrage. In your opinion, which revenue streams has the biggest chance of obtaining faster, quicker financing when proposed to banks? And also, how are you tackling it? Is it perhaps a mix of, let's say, developing some portfolios and projects with an arbitrage-based model versus, let's say, for example, part of it as grid support system? How are you tackling this at Better Energy?
With equity.
Oh, exactly. And how does that work? Of course, assuming that is always available, right? So how do you see that?
Yes, and maybe I think the fact is we haven't closed the long-term financing yet for a number of reasons. I think the key reasons is that if we take our best projects, they are just being built as we speak, and therefore we haven't really come to a project finance, and we're in the fortunate position that we have not had a need for project finance in the construction phase. But what we see and what we are aiming at is combining the best projects with existing PV plants or with new PV plants, and thereby we are combining the revenue streams. And what we see is that we have a lot of education to do towards the banks. So we are actually doing a lot of educating the banks, and for good reasons. It's a new asset. Like they need to understand the full permitting side. It's like, how does it affect on the grid? How can you share the grid? Is there any elements of being behind the meter? How does these revenue streams work? How do you get paid? Who does what? What's the responsibilities? And that affects every project agreement that's available, and therefore it's also very reasonable for them. So there's a front office somewhere that needs to understand something, and then they have a management and a credit that they need to get along to find this interesting and attractive. So we're sort of putting the best on top of solar PV project finance, and then when it is mature enough, we get the benefits of maybe added project finance, and then we recycle. But we can't make investment cases currently with the general assumption that we will obtain project finance.
Absolutely, and I think that is where indeed, let's say, the equity part comes in handy, and also the funds. And can I also ask you, Mark? Then I'll also go on to the questions from the audience. I'm blending a bit some of them. When you are modeling, in case you're modeling your revenues from arbitrage, what assumptions do you make on, let's say, the highest, the highest price and the peak points that can be additionally added to the revenues from standalone PV? I'm asking this because in some markets where we have, you know, these big discrepancies between peaks and lows, we see assumptions of even plus 20, plus 30%. What's your take on such modeling, and what are your assumptions behind it?
But I think you can see it two ways. It's again who's taking the market risk again. And I think just as a solar PV plant, like you can do a solar PV plant purely merchant, where you can speculate in that higher prices with the volatility in prices that there might be there. It's not a very bankable product, and the same thing actually goes for battery, just with even more volatility and I think uncertainty on what service does it makes the most sense to sell. And when we're looking at the business case for individual projects, it could be, oh, this project have a limited grid connection for a number of years, so therefore there's curtailment on that. Solar PV plant can, ease that pain. There might be some peak shifting in the market that you're looking at, and there might be some demand for ancillary services in the particular market. And when you add them all up, you put a range on them and see what does that look like, and where do we land on a sort of P50 assumptions. But I can also tell you that there is a lot of volatility in the return on those projects, like when you measure them from sort of early initiation of the development to the construction, that IRR can change significantly many times. And
Yeah.
I think that's probably not for long-term project finance.
Exactly, because of course we do know, right, that banks are not super fans of this volatility. Mark, also one question related to development of storage projects, because we did see in many markets that there was a bit of a speculative, let's say, bubble when it came to the development of standalone PV projects, and also, expectations of crazy prices and a lot of projects on paper that seemed decent but were quite shaky in the end. Aren't you afraid that we are seeing now, a lot of teasers coming in of storage projects, proposals all around, best development of crazy amount of megawatts? Aren't you afraid that perhaps this is also going to become a bit a bubble, and we're going to have maybe a lot of quantity but less quality projects? And if so, what can be done, to make sure that we can have quality projects on the market coming in?
Well, I think for sure, as you see it in solar as well, there is a tendency for a lot of developers to move into a market where there is an opportunity, and we've sure seen that in all markets, that there is a lot of especially standalone storage product being developed and also being for sale, and we've even seen transactions. Now we haven't seen so much built yet, but when you start getting close to the process of, like similar with solar, there was a level of quality in development. You need quality in your land agreements. You need, to have community engagement and other things. And for standalone base products, you can probably get easy locations on many of those, but is it fully clear what you actually require to get a building permit? I'm thinking about everything from fire authorities to others. Is there an operating model that is thought through? So there is a lot of. I've only seen few of these projects, sort of where we've come to a stage where they reach my table. But even with the ones that have sort of been sorted out and appear to be quality, we have seen, yeah, quite some quality issues with, and there seems to be a focus on developing a lot fast rather than developing quality. And unfortunately, sometimes that also means that it's projects that can never really be realized if they have some issues in. It could be everything from land agreements to other types of permitting. And then I think there is the issue. I saw some statistics the other day with the current battery production compared to the current demand, and there's a huge overcapacity in the battery production compared to demand. And what the demand is based on, I don't know, but if it's projects under order, under construction, I think there's fewer people maybe actually ordering batteries in large scale, because most people are probably doing it as sort of test pilots for projects that has the full permitting suite, whereas the production side has already been established. And that also brings us in a situation that it's potentially beneficial to have a good permitted side, because you can get some cheap batteries if that oversupply is continuing. So we will probably see some falling prices, not just on the revenue side, but also on the capex side.
I think it's a kind of similar story, right? What we're seeing also with solar panels, but we could also have probably a separate webinar just on that. Mark, since the topic, of course, we are discussing the Nordics market, allow me to also take one question which deep dives into one specific market, and here regarding Finland. There are indeed some legal barriers for co-located PV and BESS in Finland, seeing the latest changes in law and regulation. Are you aware of these changes in laws and regulation? Perhaps what's your view? Because of course you guys are active also down there. What's your take essentially on the legal framework for PV and BESS in Finland?
Well, I know of the new legislation, what it exactly means or what the wording is. I unfortunately don't know. So my Finnish team and the team sort of working on that will probably know more, but it's not something that I'm fully updated on. Looking at the Finnish market as a whole, there was no doubt that there is a large amount of wind already, and there is also a solid development of solar coming up, and many other assets. And I think batteries in Finland makes a lot of sense, but specifically what the new regulation entails, I'm unaware, and unfortunately we do not have ready to build batteries in Finland yet.
Yeah, I think that is also quite specific. And Mark, one more question. This one will come from me actually, because when I was indeed speaking to your colleague in Poland, he was mentioning that you guys also are financed quite heavily. Correct me if I'm mistaken, by also a lot of pension funds, right? That indeed see now solar assets as really stable, revenue generating, solid assets with a very reliable profile. Do you think given the fact that you will start adding, storage to your portfolio and there will be more volatility, that this will still be the case, or will it perhaps become a more risky profile asset, and also the kind of investors behind this kind of assets will change? What's your take on that?
I sort of tried to allude to that during my sort of first part of the presentation, and I think this is a really, really central question. And I think there's two ways of looking at it. And when you're looking at a solar and BESS co-located project on market terms, my view is that that's a de-risked asset compared to a PV standalone. But if we just add the ancillary services, then it becomes sort of a what kind of revenue can you predict in the future? And there, in order to make that long-term bankable, it would need a tolling agreement, sort of a fixed income agreement when somebody else is taking that market risk, and that then comes down to pricing between two parties, a bit similar to a PPA.
Mm-hmm.
I think it requires new revenue stream structuring, engineering, and new legal structure. So adding a complexity, but at the same time, if done right, reducing risk for the product portfolio.
Absolutely. Since we're also in this topic, Mark, allow me to take one more question from the audience, which is actually very interesting. I know where this question comes from. I won't mention the person, but it is very interesting. So when it comes to the valuation of BESS assets and the transaction market in the Nordics, where do you see the direction going? And if I can maybe allow me to trim this question to even easier words, what is the price that developers perhaps can expect when selling storage projects? Of course, there are various stages, but let's assume they're quite mature in the development phase. How do you price them in?
It's a good question. We we like partnerships with developers, and there we have sort of a pricing model which is different from sort of like marketing a turnkey project, and as many others investors, we don't participate in buying turnkey rights because there's normally too many things that needs to be fixed, and the prices seems to be too high. So I think for us, or for me, I think that the best answer for me is I actually don't know, but I think there was a bit of hype on the market, and then I think there is investors willing to buy turnkey products and then get them built and start operating, because if you're looking at the numbers, there was a very quick payback time, and so it can be potentially attractive, but one also has to be aware that the prices might be very different at the time when you COD.
Indeed, and I think it's hard probably to put down a value also because it depends also on the milestones, probably as per typical, let's say, co-development agreement, right? Going in phases. Mark, I think we won't take more of your precious time, but this has been very handy, helpful. I like when presentations are very concise and questions are to the point. So I would say, Mark, thanks a lot, for presentation, for taking these questions. We'll of course be seeing each other in Copenhagen, right? Or the small reminder on October the 3rd. Very interesting panel on project financing and on the general investment landscape. We'll go a bit deeper, and hopefully also in Finland, in Helsinki on November 24 for our Solar Plaza Summit Finland. As you can see, they're all events rebranded as Solar and Storage, so one full track also dedicated to this topic, which is here with us in the present and of course in the newer future. That said, also thank you all for joining today. Mark, thanks again, and
Thank you so
we'll
much.
see you
My
soon at
pleasure.
Solar Nordics.
Thank you.
Thank you.